Hello everyone, my name is Hahn, and in this session I would like to present the topic Sitecore XC from A to Z. So the goal of this session is to give you a rough overview over various components of Sitecore XC in giving a slight overview of important terms of Sitecore XC. So what did I do for that? While working with Sitecore XC, I encountered a lot of important terminologies, you could also say buzzwords, and while working with it, I collected them, as you can see. And of course, this is not a complete list of all terminologies, of all components, but I think a good starting point to learn Sitecore XC. So what do we do now within this session? We will go through this list alphabetically, the most important topics, and I will try to give you details from real-world experiences. So let's start directly with the first topic. It's architecture A. So for architecture, you should know a little bit of history. So 2 years ago, Sitecore launched the new version Sitecore 8.2.1. So this version was a revolutionary step forward in creating your own or Sitecore's own commercial instance. And before that, we had only Microsoft Legacy Commerce Server, this version 8.2. Then 2 years ago with version 8.2.1, it was introduced this new commerce engine, and within that, we had some kind of hybrid mode with old legacy server and new commerce engine. Then in the beginning of this year, this migration, you could say, this step forward was done completely with this release of version 9. It was so-called Sitecore XC. So nowadays we have a fully migrated, fully custom implemented working Sitecore XC solution. So what's the logical parts of this solution? So you can see on the right-hand side, Sitecore XP as a base with dependent modules like SXA and Sitecore Installation Framework. I will talk about that later. And on top of that Sitecore XP installation, we have this Sitecore XC instance, as you can see in the middle. So how is this instance, or how are these instances, XP and XC, are connected? The connection is Commerce Connect. Commerce Connect I will explain in later slides furthermore. On top of everything, we have nowadays the Sitecore Experience Accelerator, which I definitely will explain later on. And within that Experience Accelerator, we have a fully implemented storefront, which is out of the box available. Now we come to the, I think, more important part, the architectural overview with servers and SQL Server databases. So this is a standard architecture diagram of Sitecore. In the top, we have the standard scaled environment like CM and CD, master, core, and web databases. In the bottom, we have only the workflow of experience database. And the important part is the middle part, the commerce services part. What you can see is that we have a new SQL Server database with the so-called global and shared environment databases. And we have 3 commerce services, the so-called engines. Why are there 3? I will explain later on in the topic of roles. But this is the standard architecture of Sitecore XC. Then let's go on to the next topic, business tools. The business tools are quite an important part of Sitecore XC because business tools is, you could say, the tool to manage Sitecore entities, to manage Sitecore commerce content. So in former times, you used Experience Editor and Content Editor, and from Sitecore XC on, if you want to change your commerce stuff, you use these business tools. Then let's have a look at the business tools, how they work. I prepared it. So what you can see is you have the standard dashboard, and on the dashboard I clicked on the business tools, and you see it's loading a new screen on a dedicated port. So it's completely decoupled from Sitecore XP. So you see all the standard applications, and for this I moved into the Merchandise Manager, and you see how you can work with the Merchandise Manager, what you can see. You see a lot of accordions with different properties, and you can of course work with that completely decoupled. So you can edit your content, manage your content, delete stuff, associate stuff, see every detailed information, like as you can see here with sellable items, you moved from catalog to category to sellable item, and you can, of course, edit everything within this application. And the strong recommendation is, even if you can find this content in the content editor, do not use the content editor nowadays. Use this business tools, especially the merchandise manager, to manage all of your content stuff. So let's go on. And I will only present the most important topics. Now, the inventory manager, it's a new application. In former times, it was embedded in the merchandise manager. Nowadays, it is a complete standalone application. You can, as you can see, you can manage all of your inventory stuff like back order limit, pre-order limit. You can edit also stock levels, pricings, everything regarding your inventory in a clean and nice way. And of course, it is linked to the merchandise manager, so you do not have to always switch between merchandise manager and inventory manager. So then the last application I will show you. It's it's a composer application. So the composer is nowadays the way of extending standard commerce entities, like we do with templating in content editor. We can do with composer in this application, in this XC application. We can, of course, as you can see, create new views with new properties. In this example, I created a custom plugin view with taxes, and I linked this view to all of my entities' sellable items. So every sellable item gets this new view, gets this new property. Of course, we can also use other entities and subsets of entities. And as you can see, we can also manipulate these views and these properties with constraints. We can add new properties with the chosen types, string, datetime, and so on. And if we then have a look at the sellable item, so for example, if I then go back to the sellable item template, we can see, of course, I have to navigate to that, and then we can see that the sellable item template is enriched with a new view, with a new property on all sellable items. And of course, if I would have taken a subset with tagging, for example, only the tagged items would be chosen here. So then let's leave the business tools. I know I left out some tools, but these are the newest one and the most important ones. So let's go on with Commerce Connect. Commerce Connect is a very old tool, I would say. It's older than Sitecore Experience Commerce. In general, Commerce Connect is used to combine Experience Platform with any commerce system like Hybris, or in this case, Sitecore Commerce itself. In this view, you see the standard items which are installed after standard installation. And don't be confused, we don't need every item. So you can see we have an overview over catalogs, but as I've mentioned, use the business tools nowadays with XC and not the catalogs. But what you have to use is a part of commerce terms. It's here. So commerce terms are used to, you could say, set up your terms within business tools. So if you open, for example, the promotion manager and want to add actions or qualifications, you have a drop-down with all available benefits, qualifications, actions, and so on. If you create via plugin your own benefit, for example, you have to go in here in the commerce terms and add the terms for this special plugin here. So you have to work in here. The latest, the parts below, the shared settings and storefronts are standard. So shared settings are really general settings like currencies, like countries, like payment, shipping. So really standard stuff which is used by XP and also propagated to the XC instance. And the latest point is a storefront part where you add your custom storefronts like it is done with AdventureWorks, Habitat. You can also add your storefronts like I did in a customer project with B2B and B2C shop. So not only items, but we get also some new architectural concept like new pipelines. You can see on these two configuration files what we get in some with Sitecore Experience Commerce. So the left-hand side is a standard Commerce Connect pipeline. So it creates a add cart lines pipeline for us, which can be triggered programmatically. and which then executes all of these processors. This out of the box has, of course, no real implementation like for specific hybrid system or specific experience commerce engines. The real implementation comes with a patch file. So Sitecore XC already implemented everything for us, so it patched this pipeline with processors which in the end call the RESTful APIs of Experience Commerce, and then the magic happens. So we get a full, for example here, add card lines pipeline. Then, as I've mentioned, it can be triggered programmatically. So for example, if you install Commerce Connect, we get a bunch of so-called service providers. This one is an example. The structure is always the same. So if we want to use service provider, you have to assemble the request object. You can call the service provider and get a response object, which then can be reused in your XP installation instance or within your business logic. Nowadays, in Sitecore XC, Sitecore implemented out of the box the whole service providers for us in a foundation level. In former times, for example, 8.2.1, we had to implement such stuff on our own. But nevertheless, it's good to know where to find such stuff and where to edit it. Then, another topic on C, it's composition. So in an object-oriented programming scenario, most likely we use inheritance. So inheritance, if we want to create additional functionality, you have a base object, you inherit from it, and create your own functionality in that inherited object. Sitecore uses another way. It uses composition. That means we always take the base object as it is, like a card or card line object, and use it all the time. But if we want to create additional components or additional fields, properties, we do not touch that base object. We create new components, and you could say we attach these components to the standard object. How do we do that? We do that like this. So we create in code, for example, for loyalty points, a loyalty point component. And then if we want to use that component, we can simply do that. I highlighted the important code line. So for example, I wanted to add the loyalty component with loyalty points to all of my card lines. So I extracted the card line, and simply called the Sitecore helper get component with my generic loyalty point component. And Sitecore in the background does everything for me. So it creates this component if it's not existing, and it adds it to our card line. So you can see if I execute the call, for example, I want to get the card, you see that highlighted block is now my loyalty component block, and I did nothing more than get component and add my loyalty point, and Sitecore does the rest. So really easy to extend and to modify all of the standard commerce entities. Then debugging, it's a very short topic, but it's, in my opinion, a very important topic because you should know how to debug your application. Of course, debugging can be done in various ways. I only want to show you my favorite way, my personal favorite way. So if I'm working with Visual Studio, I let Visual Studio take over the whole role of my authoring system. So normally we have the authoring system as IIS application. In my local instance, I shut down always this application and let Visual Studio take over the role. So as preparation, you can shut down your Visual Studio, your IIS, and then I show you how to debug it. You can simply call the debugger because the normal application is not running on the port anymore. Visual Studio takes over the part of the authoring system, and if you start it, you get the metadata screen. And if you see this screen, it's fully started and it can be used at any time. So for example, if I add a breakpoint here and call the corresponding functionality in Postman to test something, we really quick see the breakpoint is hit and we can debug everything what we want. And of course, if we then want to see the results, we can go over and see in Postman the results. For example, here's a generic taxes plugin to handle some German tax rates. And you see, if you want to see the result in Postman, you can see there's a generic taxes component. And of course, it's very easy then to stop the debugger, add a line of code, and then and you could say start the debugger again instead of deploying all the time to your local IIS. I think that's, in my point of view, a very good way of debugging your application. Then environment. you could say is one of the most important topics in Sitecore XC. So environment, to explain environment, I have to explain a bunch of other terminologies. So it's highly coupled to policy and it's highly coupled to roles. So I try to, in this topic, explain all of these terminologies. So let's start first with policy. Basically, you could say a policy you create for your plugin, and a policy is nothing more than settings for your policy. Of course, there can be different settings. As you can see, in a standard installation, we have a lot of settings, policy files, and policy embedded within environment. So policy for your plugin is a set of settings. Now, what's an environment? An environment is, you could say very easy, it's a bunch of different settings. So for example, if you want to create different environments, you can create them. As you can see on the left-hand side of the screenshot, you can see we have a lot of policies, but also 6 files which are not surrounded by a rectangle. These are the environment files. Why are there 3? I come later on with roles, but we have 2 different environments, Habitat and Adventure Works. So these Habitat and Adventure Works only differ in their policy settings. So if they use policy or if they have different settings of policies. And each environment then can be used by different storefronts. So that's basically an environment. So then we come to the point, why are there 3 files of environments? So you can see shops, authoring, and minions. That's because, I go back. So one topic left in policy before we reach the roles. So you can see the policy file. You can see on the right-hand side the structure of the policy. And of course, I have to explain how to get this policy into your code. That's this little slide. It's very easy. You can you create a policy class which inherits from a generic policy class. And of course, you have to make corresponding fields in your class. I highlight them here. If you, for example, want to create a list of decimal, you do it this way, or a Boolean value, or a string value. And in this special case, I used the standard global text policy, so I only extended it via inheritance, so the standard fields are also used here. And how do we use that in code if everything is correctly mapped? It's a simple Sitecore out-of-the-box available code get policy, and we get our environment specific policy for our environment. So now we come to roles. We come one step further with from environment to roles. You see out of the box we have shops, minions, DevOps, and authoring roles. And maybe you ask yourself, what is the purpose of these roles? So it has only one purpose. It has the purpose of scalability. So in general, you could say each of this role is a single dedicated Sitecore XC instance, Sitecore Commerce Engine, with exact the same code status. So the code is the same, it has only different settings. Maybe an example explains it a little better. So in a standard minimal scenario where we have a scaled environment with CM and CD system, let's assume we have only one single XC engine. It is connected maybe like this, but you see all the traffic from the left-hand and right-hand side, authors and visitors, have to go through this commerce engine. So often it will get heavy load. How do we scale that? We scale that, like, for example, like this, with a load balancer, and we multiply our servers by 3. It's a very simple approach, of course, but it has a lot of drawbacks. So, for example, the dedicated content from authors and visitors still have to go through all of these 3 engines, and we have to take care of session handling and stuff like that. So Sitecore introduced the concept of roles. So how do we split then our architecture regarding roles? So the split is made by the traffic which should be served by the commerce engine. So for example, we take our 3 environment, our 3 engines, and you can see on the left-hand side, the first engine has gotten the role authoring, and it is close to the CM system and only communicates to the CM system, because on the CM system, most likely we have content authors which use a business tool, and this business tool traffic has really other requirements to the engine than, for example, on the right-hand side, the visitors, really shop visitors, which then communicate with the shop's role engine. And therefore, we split it up with their purpose, and so we have created an easy way of scalability. And of course, within that authoring roles and shop roles, we can of course use multiple shop roles and multiple authoring roles. Then one little side note, you could say, you know now what roles are, and you see in the standard XP0 installation like it is on my machine. So it has only one CMCD system and everything is on that machine. So in the standard installation, you see on the file system and on the RIS that authoring, minions, DevOps and shops are installed. And you can see in the RIS that every role is also assigned. But you know now that roles are there for scalability and have different purpose, different traffic. But in the XP0 installation, we do not have such kind of differentiation. So why do we have these roles? The simple answer is only demonstration reason. So we could also remove DevOps and shops because they are not actively used. As you can see in the Sitecore XP config file, you can see it's only connected to the authoring system, and the other two instances, ops and shops, are not actively used. So they could be safely removed. It's only for us, for demonstration reason, that we know that there are roles and we can use them. Then we go on with node settings. What are node settings? I would say it's quite an important part of logging. So we have some standard logs of Commerce Engine, like we have in the Sitecore Experience platform. If you encounter an error, you only have to know, is it XP or XC, and you can have a look at the dedicated log file. But what's now these node settings we get? Node settings, you see, has a bunch of standard information, like how it is bootstrapped, at which time, stuff like basic information, but also quite important information if you want to extend the Experience Commerce platform. So as you can see, I have pointed out a special pipeline, so like the add cart line pipeline. You can see, we see the add cart line pipeline, and we see in brackets that it has input and output parameter. And of course the same with blocks. We have, for example, the add context blocks, and it gets cart and it gives out the cart. Why is this information important? Because in a normal scenario, you will extend the commerce engine with a new plugin, which hooks into specific pipelines, or even create a new pipeline. And there you can have a look at this node settings file if your plugin is working correctly. So does it appear in that list of blocks? Does it have the right input and output parameter, which have to be matching in the previous and next block? All the information like this can be seen as a node setting, and it's really, really good to sometimes have a look at these settings. So next topic related to node settings is NuGet. Standard NuGet feed can be retrieved also for Sitecore Commerce. You only have to connect to the feed. You always choose the first. It's Visual Studio 2015 and higher, and the newest version of Commerce Engine only supports 2015 and higher. And if you created the NuGet feed correctly, you have the full access of all Sitecore Commerce plugin. Why is that important? Because if you want to, in this case, extend the cart pipeline or any cart pipeline and hook into with your own blocks, you have to reference this plugin, this cart plugin, and to get the namespaces of all the plugins, of all the blocks and pipelines to correctly hook into everything. So therefore, you have to know how to get your NuGet feed and get the plugins. Then OData is a core principle. For OData, I brought the standard definition. So I think it's really self-explaining. So OData is an industrial standard. Sitecore XC uses OData for its own RESTful API. Why does it use OData? Because it produces a machine-readable metadata file, and you can see it's the start screen. When you run the engine, for example, it shows up the metadata screen, and this metadata screen is a machine-readable file, and it empowers the interface so that, for example, clients can build up a generic and powerful client to consume that API. And for example, if you change something in the interface, entities, in arguments, it will appear here on the metadata screen. And if you regenerate your code for this client, you will also get the metadata information again. Then we come to P, like Postman and plugin. You already saw Postman. Postman is a tool for testing your APIs, or in our case, the RESTful APIs from Sitecore Experience Commerce. And on the left-hand side, you see Sitecore already provides us with, out of the box, the whole collection of every call we need to access Sitecore XC from not the storefront. So for example, if we want to retrieve a card, we simply go to the collection, search for the get card call, and can call it without using the storefront. So it makes it really easy to test the Experience Commerce engine without any front-end or storefront overhead. Even each call needs some dedicated header. You see on the left-hand side, these are standard header for Experience Commerce and have to be set on every call. Also here, Postman makes it really easy to set these header files because Postman has a structure of also environments, and you could imagine these environments are matching environments with our Experience Commerce environment. So for example, in a standard Postman scenario, we will have habitat and authoring environments pre-dedicated, and we can choose them and then call our functionality, for example, get card, in different environments to retrieve the correct results. Then plugin, very, very short plugin, because I know there are other sessions which cover this topic extensively. So a plugin in general is a functionality, a piece of code which extends our .NET Core application. So the standard Experience Commerce application is a standalone .NET Core web server, you could say, and without any plugin, it's really, really powerless server because it cannot do anything. What makes it powerful is each plugin which comes in addition. So out of the box, Sitecore provides us with a bunch of plugins, and of course with the SDK where we can create our own plugins. Then this is a standard structure of a plugin. So also for Visual Studio, we have a scaffolding template to create plugins out of the box. And this is a full example of a demo plugin. So we can see that some terminologies are appearing again, like policies, like pipelines, arguments. And based on this Visual Studio feature, you could go on and create your own plugin to use stuff or components of these implementations, or create your complete own plugin. Then I think we are coming to close to the end. So we come to S like SXA and SIP. As I've mentioned in the beginning, Sitecore Experience Accelerator and Sitecore Installation Framework are very important topics. So for example, Sitecore Experience Accelerator, for everyone who does not know what SXA is, the strong recommendation is to learn SXA because it's a really, really good approach in making Sitecore solution in a generic way. So maybe two sentences. SXA is a modular toolkit where you build your modules like image text, like stage, only once. So you have one, for example, stage, as you can see here, and this stage can be reused in every project, in every other customer project or whatever. So what makes it powerful is the reusability of all these modules. And in Sitecore Experience Commerce, nowadays, in this new implementation, also this Experience Commerce parts are completely covered. As you can see here, we have new sections in the SXA and more than 40 out-of-the-box available modules, which you do not have to implement on your own if you start using Experience Commerce. So based on that, based on the XP modules, based on the XC modules, you can create very easy, very quick, your first custom storefront in a very generic way. Then Sitecore Installation Framework. To understand how important that is, I brought up the installation guide from 8.2.1. So I also worked with that version, and you can see on the left-hand side we have a bunch of categories of steps, and each category had up to a dozen of single steps, like installing modules, like creating SQL Server users, and so on and so on. So the problem was there were a high risk of producing errors in all of these single steps. And of course, if we want to reinstall this Sitecore installation instance, we had to go and make every step again. So what changed in the newest version of Sitecore XC is that we use Sitecore installation framework, and in the end, you could say it's a bunch of PowerShell script. You only have to configure these scripts and you run that script, and everything is done for you in the background. The only hard part is, of course, setting these parameters. You do not have to go to through each parameter, only that you see the total amount of parameters are very high. So this is the hard part, to find a correct set for your installation, for example, for your developer machine, for your customer machine, or wherever you want to install it. You have to find the correct set of parameters which fit to your environment. And of course, I brought with me some experiences I made. And of course, there are errors. That's completely normal that you produce errors, minor and major errors, of course. But that's normal, and most likely you have done something wrong in your configuration. And of course, a lot of errors, but that's the last part I wanted to show you. If everything is done correctly, it is very easy to reinstall this instance within a few seconds. So for example, when I installed the Sitecore Commerce engine and this whole platform, I deleted it and wanted to see how quick I can reinstall it, and it was really seconds, and only had to re-execute the installation framework script again. And of course, you can take all this bunch of scripts and all the dependent modules, put it on another PC, like another developer machine, and reinstall it there again within seconds. It's a really powerful tool. Then, last but not least, the topic workflows. Quite an important topic. And for workflows, you have to keep in mind it's not only about workflows, it's about workflows, versioning, publishment. Then for workflows, you should know workflows in Sitecore Commerce in former times. For example, in version 8.2.1 was about a staging system in the old commerce server. And with the release of the version 9, initially, we don't even had workflows. So it was not implemented, but with the update 1, the latest version of Sitecore Experience Commerce, nowadays we have again versions. So each entity, if you call it, catalog, categories, or even sellable items, you see in the URL, you see in the summary tab, has now a version property. And of course, when you have versions, you have workflows, and of course with workflows you can have publishment. And in this scenario, we have version 1 and published false. So this item is editable. If we want now to publish that item, you can click on Promote to Next Workflow Step, easily choose you are in draft and you want to submit that version. And afterwards, you are in awaiting approval and you can approve or reject. And you know it's a standard, it's very similar to the standard Sitecore XP workflow. You can, as it is in the Sitecore XP workflow, you can customize it for your XC instance. It's only a standard workflow here in this case. Now, if we create that step, or if we execute that step, we have published equals to true. That means it is now published. Now, keep in mind the architecture. For example, as we have seen in the architecture diagram in the beginning, the SQL server, we have only one SQL server, so we have no real publishment from master to web, only one single database, so we have only a dedicated property, which is then set to true or false, so that the content delivery instance, for example, knows that this item can be retrieved by itself. Then, at this step, this version 1, if it's published, it cannot be edited anymore. So it is, you could say, even for the admin, it's blocked. If we want now to edit some stuff, to add some stuff, we have to create a new version, but that we can simply do in add create version or add version. And then we get two versions under the entity versions tab. Note, we are still on version 1. That was quite confusing for me the first times. We have to actively click on add version 2. And if you do that, you see in the URL, in the summary tab, we have version 2, and then we can edit it again and again. So, that was about versions. Last slide about me, Christian Hahn. I'm Senior.NET Developer, Senior Consultant, and Sitecore Commerce MVP 2018. I hope you enjoyed the session and learned a lot. So, have a nice day.